Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, David Corenswet is the Man of Steel as James Gunn kicks off his new DC cinematic universe in Superman. After intervening to stop the Boravian invasion of Jahanpur, Superman, played by David Corenswet, has drawn criticism for his actions, even from his girlfriend Lois Lane, played by Rachel Brosnahan. Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, who is allied with Boravia, seizes an opportunity to destroy Superman and his reputation once and for all, forcing Superman to prove to the world that he is the hero he aspires to be. With James Gunn rebooting the DC universe on film after his success at Marvel with Guardians of the Galaxy, the first thing he's done, like Zack Snyder before him, is begin with Superman. And Superman is a character that is notoriously hard to get right. The fact the character is so strong and powerful can make it hard to feel like he's in danger, and his ideals of truth, justice, and the American way can feel old-fashioned and anachronistic. But while he's often derided as a big blue Boy Scout, Superman might not necessarily be a cool superhero to like, but his idealism is his strength. That's the reason why the character has endured and remains so popular. But maybe it's so hard to do well because the character was done so right before. Richard Donner's 1978 Superman remains a remarkable accomplishment and remains the blueprint from which so many superhero films are made from even today. Donner's commitment to verisimilitude, to taking the character seriously and treating it with respect, created a beacon of hope in the cynicism of 70s post-Vietnam America. And while they are definitely showing their age now, the then groundbreaking special effects lived up to the promise that you will believe a man could fly. But we also believed in the man. Christopher Reeve's performance in the title role not only defined his career, but the character too. He is and will always be the bar to which all actors in the role will be compared to, because he simply embodied the character, his physicality, his comic timing, his likability. The films may have gotten worse with each passing entry, but Reeve always elevated them with his commitment to the part. The Donner films stood up against time and advancements in special effects, but when they've tried to bring Superman into the modern era, it's proven very hard to top. Superman Returns tried to solve the problem by being a sequel to the Donner film, but it's a surprisingly dour, uneventful movie, which didn't give Brandon Routh room to shine and has frankly aged like milk. And Zack Snyder's bombastic Man of Steel suffered by comparison by trying to do the origin story again and then dissolved into a deafening, numbing succession of action scenes. I always thought Henry Cavill got a bit of a raw deal. He can be charismatic, but he so rarely got to show that as Superman, especially as he got such limited screen time after his first film. In Batman v Superman, he has about as many lines as the Terminator and is about as cheerful, and he spends most of Justice League dead. I know Snyder's films do have their fans, but I think he was ill-suited for Superman, and his take has always felt bitter and joyless to me. And James Gunn might not be the obvious choice to reboot Superman, especially since he produced Brightburn, written by his brother and cousin, which was basically a horror movie take on the character. What if Superman was evil? That was itself a pretty mean-spirited and cynical slog. But Gunn has always had a long connection to comic books and superheroes. He's gone from working at Troma, making films like The Specials and Super, very countercultural satires of superheroes, to the mainstream, running the show at DC Studios. He's really grown and matured over the years, and you can see that in the superhero films he's been involved with. And Gunn's take on Superman is very much identifiable as his own. Like Guardians before it, it not just acknowledges the silly and surreal side of comic books, it embraces them with a knowing humour. There's a distinctly Silver Age flavour to the Superman at times, and when an adorably ugly beastie is released that swiftly grows into a giant kaiju in the very next scene, you know you're watching a film from the same eccentric that made The Suicide Squad, even with much less blood and F-bombs. However, this wears its numerous influences on its sleeve from many different incarnations of the superhero, but especially that of the Madonna film. The main titles are those distinctive blue trails past the camera, and there's lots of little nods like Luther with Otis and Miss Teschmacher, and of course, the classic John Williams theme is incorporated into John Murphy and David Fleming's impressive score. Because again, how can you improve on one of the most iconic bits of music in film history? You can't. Da 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 da. Da, da, da. The marketing has been leaning into evoking the Donner film, especially some of the posters, and like that one, it's updating Supes for a cynical time, and for once, it's a comparison a Superman movie can live up to. So how exactly do you introduce a new Superman when his origin story is so well told? Simple. You turn the story inside out. Gunn makes the bold choice to start in media res, with Corenswet's Man of Steel already established. We open with a bunch of text captions very quickly setting up the history, and then it's right into the action. It makes for a bit of a strange start because it doesn't feel like one, and I do have to admit that the opening section did throw me a bit off balance because there's a lot going on and it dares you to keep up, but I soon found myself getting into the film's groove. It's the kind of thing that you can only pull off if the character is so well established that he doesn't need an introduction, or it's simply been told too many times, like Spider-Man before him. But thinking back upon it, I realised just how clever this is. Not only is not starting on Krypton a relief, but it also invites us to rediscover the Superman story through the plot, and that puts us in the same mindset as Supes himself, who is disconnected from his birth planet and parents. He only has fragments which were damaged when he came to Earth, and so fragments are all we have. But it isn't just Superman who arrives fully formed, but the whole world he inhabits as well. This version of Metropolis is filled with brand names for companies in-universe, nor is Supes the only hero around, as we have fellow metahumans in the form of the Justice Gang, like Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific, Isabel Merced's hawkgirl, and Gunn regular Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, an egocentric Green Lantern whose ludicrous bowl-cut hair draws a laugh every time he appears on screen. It's a universe where large monster attacks are so routine and commonplace that a lot of the time citizens seem barely fazed by them anymore when they're not just gawping at them from the windows, or a moment where the Justice Gang fights an interdimensional imp which is just playing out in the background of a lengthy dialogue scene. It's heightened, sometimes to the point of absurdist humour. There's other links as well to Gunn's other DC properties, like Frank Grillo reprising his role as Rick Flag Sr. from Creature Commandos, and there's a fair number of building blocks being put in place for future entries. The world building here just screams confidence, especially after the haphazardness of DC movies following Snyder's departure. But how do you make an audience care about a character like Superman? Again, it's simple. You make him vulnerable. The very first time we see Corenswet's version, he's smashing into the ice and spitting up blood, having lost a fight for the very first time. And it won't be the last time this Superman will get seriously injured and knocked around. In fact, he spends a lot of the movie getting beaten up, both literal and figurative, probably the most we've ever seen in a film before. But the most important part is that he gets back up again. He heals, he dusts himself off, and gets into the next battle, because this Superman will never stop fighting for what he stands for. He's tough, resilient, and he's human. And Gunn foregrounds that as much as he can. Kal-El may have came from another world, but he was raised on Earth and tries to do the best that he can given the circumstances. He's not perfect, but he aspires to be the best he can possibly be and inspire others to do the same. That's Superman. In stark contrast to the huge implied body count of Man of Steel, Gunn makes a conscious effort to show just how much Supes goes out of his way to try and save people from danger and collateral damage. Chris Reeve saved a cat from a tree. Here we get Corenswet dramatically saving a squirrel. It's funny, but it's also keeping in spirit with the character. And Corenswet is fantastic in the title role. His heightened mannerisms immediately evoke Christopher Reeve, and I think he gets the character in the same way that Reeve did, but he also makes it his own as well. Certainly it's the most assured film version of the character in decades. Corenswet has the sincere hopefulness of the character down. There's a charm and confidence to him that makes you believe in him and his ideals. He just radiates strength without being forceful about it, because he has conviction. One of Gunn's recurring themes is parenthood and identity, and his Superman is at his weakest point where his connection to his past and the ideals that make him who he is are threatened. He becomes lost. He doesn't know what to do, and it's his connection to his Earth parents, the Kents, that allow him to heal. Unlike previous film versions, Pa Kent is still alive, played here by Pruitt Taylor Vince, and it's clear where Clark gets so much of his compassion from. He is the embodiment of a good man and a supportive father, and is unafraid to show his emotions. Tellingly, the film was released on the birthday of Gunn's late father, and this theme is the core of the film. I do wish we got a bit more of Clark Kent the Disguise, because what we briefly see shows Corenswet has the comic chops to pull it off, but we spend a fair chunk of the movie with Clark Kent the Man, which is not the same as when he's got his superhero costume on. The scenes he has with Rachel Brosnahan's Lois Lane are among some of the best in the movie. Because they're already in a relationship when the film starts, there isn't the will they, won't they of Reeve and Margot Kidder, but they do have the chemistry. She is the person he allows to see the real him, and they have a dynamic that feels real and intimate. They're funny, they fight, it's complicated, not least of which by having to try and keep up his secret identity, and especially the fact that he ostensibly interviews himself, which is a pretty serious breach of journalistic ethics. The scene where they're talking about punk rock and Clark says that he's a fan of a popular but uncool band called the Mighty Crabjoys is a pivotal moment in the film, almost like a response to all those that think that Superman is uncool. But he's not about what's trendy, and what he stands for might seem corny, but he loves what he loves, and he cares for people unabashedly, and he doesn't care if people think badly of that. In a jaded world, kindness and generosity becomes an act of rebellion, and what could be more punk than that? It's the same countercultural spirit that runs all the way through Guardians of the Galaxy. There's also the key subplot of Bravia trying to invade Jahan-Pur, both fictional nations, but has obvious parallels to not just Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but also what's going on in the Middle East as well, with Israel. Superman's intervention to stop a war has caused a foreign policy dilemma, as Bravia is an American ally, but they are clear villains. And this Superman places himself above politics. He doesn't work on that level. He only thinks about right and wrong. People were going to die, he screams. And that's all the justification he needs, and the film agrees. That's what sets this version apart from previous incarnations, where he's often been the symbol of Americana. His popular motto includes "and the American way," and we have Chris Reeve restoring the flag to the White House in Superman 2. But that doesn't really fly in 2025, pun intended, because this Superman isn't a representative of America. He acts on his own beliefs, which makes US officials rather twitchy of him. But it's worth noting that Gunn isn't the first to do this. Zack Snyder's version was also held under suspicion by the American government, and Batman v Superman also had Supes drawing criticism by intervening in foreign conflict, which Lex Luthor seized an opportunity to attack. Both are very post-9/11 versions of the character. The difference I feel though is that Snyder seemed to agree with Luthor and others that Superman is a threat and was frightened of him. The danger in his films is always the fear that he would go dark and no one would be able to stop him. The reason why Gunn's version of this storyline works is that he believes in Supes as a symbol of hope and good in a way that Snyder just didn't seem to. Speaking of Lex Luthor, this incarnation might be the nastiest, most vindictive version we've seen in any film to date. Nicholas Hoult has certainly played his fair share of weaselly vile characters, and his Luthor fits right amongst them. His Luthor is a raging narcissist who is almost entirely driven by his jealousy and contempt for Superman, rather pointedly referring to him as an alien, an it. How very dare it steal the centre of attention that Lex so clearly deserves. He carries out his attacks on Superman with a team like a rocket launch and uses his science recklessly, throwing tantrums when he doesn't get his own way. I wonder who that could be based on. But this Luthor, and by extension the film itself, goes to some pretty dark places, and I don't just mean the pocket universe that he's using to keep people in prison, including ex-girlfriends. A scene of Russian roulette in particular might be the most sadistic and callous he has ever been on screen. Hulk's performance balances this out by making him quite over the top and darkly comic. There's scenes where you can almost see the veins popping out of Hulk's bald head as he screams into the camera, and Hulk is especially amusing when his Luthor goes on self-aggrandizing tirades about people not appreciating his genius. He strikes that line between being despicable and pathetic, that balance of sweet and sour that Gunn's films so often have. Moreover, his Luthor is very much one for the Fox News age. You're constantly seeing all these commentators talking about suits with all their various viewpoints, and Lex is a manipulator trying to control the narrative and weaponize it, even having a gag where monkeys constantly type out hate for him. Superman is proudly unsubtle about its commentary, which is refreshing for an era where so many superhero films are afraid to evoke even any real-world parallels, but it's the reason why this version feels so right for our time. And if you're surprised that an alien character made in the 1930s by two Jewish creators is political, yeah, there's some shares in Otisburg I'd like to sell you. James Gunn's Superman is a rousing triumph. It's absolutely jam-packed with ideas and characters, at times a little bit too much so that it can't fit all of it in, and the exposition does get a little bit clunky at times because of that, but they're really promising glimpses of the future of DC. It's just so crammed with stuff while also honouring what has come before. Gunn just throws in the whole kitchen sink. I haven't even mentioned Gunn's dynamic use of the camera in the action scenes, where he keeps Supes and others centered in the frame but rotates the angle around them. There's a particularly impressive moment with Mr. Terrific and Lois that's a standout bit of staging and choreography. And I haven't even mentioned the absolutely adorable Krypto, Superman's dog, who just absolutely steals the show at several points by being a very good bad dog. But most of all, it gets Superman right. It does for the character now what the Donner version did in '78, making him feel timely and relevant again. Its optimism and sense of fun is infectious and very entertaining once it builds up speed. Even that slightly disorientating opener I think will play better on subsequent viewings. It's the Superman this character has deserved after years of being mistreated on film. This is a crowd-pleasing, hopeful flick that this time will make you feel like you could fly. If you like this review and you want to support my work, you can give me a tip at my Ko-fi page, or my YouTube Super Thanks feature, which is right below the video. Or you can help me take flight over at my Patreon, where you can see my videos early among other perks, including access to my Discord server, and you can also join YouTube memberships for similar perks. Or you can just simply like, share and subscribe, it all helps. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.